Good morning. Today we're going to start talking about something that I think will become a theme throughout the entire year. And that's basically the need, if you're going to be a scientist, to keep a logbook. And I mean a really good logbook. And the reason why logbooks are so important is because it keeps us remembering what it was we did as a scientist. That's really important if we want to do the experiment again. But it also helps us to be able to communicate to other people who may want to do our science experiment or may need to learn from the fact that we did our science experiment. All good scientists keep a record of what they did, and that God is the master scientist. He is the best there ever was. He was the very first scientist. He's the one that said, "Let there be light," and there was light. And everything about what he did, all that he did, he recorded in his science logbook, the Bible. And he gave it to us so that we could see what it is that he did. So all of creation, he wrote it down. Now, he didn't give us all the details, but he gave us all the details that we would need in order to understand that he did create and how he created. God is the very first and the best scientist, and he gave us his logbook. Studying it is essential to living our lives as we were created for. God's logbook is full of integrity. You can trust it. The Bible actually says it is impossible for God to lie. He did not deceive us in any way in his logbook, but only wrote the truth. God, as the creator, gives us testimony to how he created and how life came into existence. We don't have to guess. We don't need to sit there and say what we think might have been present at the beginning of creation, because God tells us what was present. And he said there was nothing except God. And then he spoke into creation everything. And he gives us a detailed record of how he did that. God gives us all the instructions we need to understand life itself and how it came to be and why we were created. It's all in his science logbook. In Colossians 1:17 it says, "He is before all things, and in him all things hold together." So God is the one we can trust. He was there when he created. And we can look at his logbook and we can know that he is telling us the truth. God tells us in his logbook that he is before all things and that he himself did not have a beginning. He tells us that it is him that holds all things together, making life possible in every way. From the macroscopic, that's the really big, think the cosmos big, to the microscopic, which is so small that we cannot even see it, even with a microscope. It is God who holds our galaxy together, our sun together, our planet together, our bodies together, and every single one of our cells together. He even holds our cells' organelles together and even holds molecules together. Our God is intensely involved in his creation. If he ceased to think of us, we would surely cease to exist in that very moment of time. Yet he promises that he will never quit thinking of us. A logbook. Let's go back and talk about what a logbook is. As you go through science this year, you're going to be writing in a logbook. You're going to write down some of your science experiments, some of the observations that you may make, and you're going to begin to see what the process looks like to be a good scientist and to record in a logbook. A logbook is a detailed and permanent account of your project. It cannot and should not be changed. That's important. Therefore, we don't use a pencil when we make our logbook entries because a pencil can be erased. When we do make mistakes as we write in our logbooks with a pen, we cross them off one line through, put our initial, and fix it. And that gives it integrity. It shows that, you know what, we are human and sometimes we make mistakes, but we're going to be so honest in our logbook as you will be able to see every mistake that we make. In your logbook, you always should include your observations, your questions you have as you work, your hypothesis and ideas that come to mind as you are thinking through the science experiment, and a detailed and permanent record of your project that includes exactly when and what you did every single step of the way. Think about God's logbook. That's exactly what he did for us. He gave us a step-by-step explanation to how he created life here on earth. He said, "Let there be light." And instantly there was light. Now, we are not that kind of scientists. We cannot sit down and just say the words and something pops into existence. But our God is that kind of a scientist. And that is how he created. Therefore, that's how he wrote it down for us. A good logbook will allow you to look back on what you did later if a question arises to what happened and why did I get this result? And then that way you can go back and look at, oh, here's why that might have occurred. Or if you decide to continue a related experiment later on, based on your observations from this project, you'll be able to see it in the logbook. You'll want to document all your product design ideas, any ideas that you have, engineering challenges and product testing data. Information that you can put down, anything will be helpful, because someday later you may look back and say, hey, the idea I had when I was in Mrs. Schlegel's science class was such a good idea. Let me look back and see how far I took it and see what I can do from here on out to bring it to fruition. Your logbook should have a label on it. And that label should have your name, the scientist, your teacher's name, and contact information so that if you were to lose your logbook, somebody found it, they could get it back to you. There should also be a title of the project that you're working on for that year. So the very first entry should have the name of what it is that the lab is that we're doing or the project that you're working on. You should number the pages first before you write anything in your logbook. And then if you think that you want to go back and write something, but you want to go ahead and start a different project, go ahead and skip some of the pages so that there's space in there to finish up that project and start the next. The reason why we do this is we don't want to pull out, rip out pages when you are completely done with a project and you do have leftover pages that are blank. That's when you put a big X through the middle of the empty pages, showing that there's nothing more. Nobody can add anything to it. So once you completely finish a section, that's what you do with your empty pages. You should also have a table of contents, and every time you add something into your logbook, go ahead and write it into the table of contents so that later on, when you look back at it, you can find what it is you're looking for very easily. A date is important. Go ahead and date each entry. Even if you're working on 2 different science projects at the same time, you've skipped those pages and you're thinking, yeah, but the date's going to be here on this one and the same date's going to be on this one too. Isn't that going to be confusing? No, it's just going to show that you were working on 2 projects at once. Always date your entries. One of the things to remember in your science project or in your science logbook is to make sure that your entries are not long. You want to kind of keep them short. You don't even have to always have them in sentences. Sometimes your thoughts will need to be in sentences. If I assign for you to write a paragraph about something, then yes, I would like to have a full paragraph with sentences. But sometimes you're just writing what you see, and that could just be an observation. It does not need to be a complete sentence. It can be brief. Basically, you want to be able to have it clear enough and precise enough that you can look back on it years from now and still be able to understand what it was you were doing. It is important to write legibly. In other words, I don't know about you guys, but I can get really excited as I'm writing something and I can get a little bit sloppy. We don't really want our log notebook to be that sloppy, so you do want to try to keep it legible when you write something. Make sure that you can read it and somebody else may be able to read it as well. When you do your drawings, you want your drawings to be very clear. You want to take time to draw them well. And then after you've drawn them, go ahead and label them very carefully. Don't leave lines that just go everywhere. In class, I'll show you how to label your drawings in such a way as to allow them to be neat, tidy, and easily read. Don't just throw in a whole bunch of loose papers into your logbook. If there is a chart or something that you want to add later, maybe you drew on a different piece of paper and it's an excellent drawing and you want to get that in, then what you should do is to carefully glue it into your logbook. Again, do not remove pages. If you rip out pages, it looks like you were hiding something or that there was incomplete information or somebody stole part of your logbook. One of the keys to being a really good science journalist is to keep that logbook every single day. Now, I know that in our class we only meet for a science lab once a week, so you don't have to have something written in your logbook every single day. But hey, if you work on it outside of class, be sure to get something written in there. And then when you are in class, make sure that that information from that day's lab does get into your logbook. if I give you, and I'm hoping to at least give you one lab write-up this year that's absolutely a complete lab write-up, which means it's not just, how to make an observation or telling what you did in lab that day, but it's an actual report of the entire project. And when that is the case, I want you to include some project planning. What did you do to come up with this project? How did you plan it? What were your thoughts, your hypothesis? So you have a section on project planning. Then you need to have another section on research. What research did you do in order to accomplish this project that you were doing? What materials did you use? Oh, this is big, guys. Always remember to list all your materials. It's really important. There are labs that I've done in the past where I lazily didn't include all the materials. And as I came back to them, which I did do because I wanted to do that lab again, I discovered that, I don't have all the material lists. I had to go back and try to remember what I used. Always list all your materials. The experimental procedure itself, you want to document everything that happens. Hey, if you're doing a chemistry experiment and it blows up and splatters stuff all over the table, go ahead and tell about that happening. Take a picture and glue it in. Go ahead and be honest about it. Why did it occur? What exactly happened? You'll want to include data that you collect. And sometimes that means making a table or a chart. And you want to make them easy to read and to understand. And lastly, you'll want to do a conclusion. And in a conclusion is where you wrap everything up. Why did I do it? Did I learn what I wanted to learn? Did it answer questions and am I done with it? Or did it cause me, even though it answered questions, to ask even more questions? And to kind of guide me towards where I might want to take it next. And that's really good to do in your conclusion, is say where you would take this experiment if you were able to continue to explore. One more piece that I would love to see in every one of your conclusions is a time in which you are really stopping to contemplate, how does God, the God of the universe, fit into this project that I did? Is there anything that I could learn, or I did learn, about God as I was doing this science experiment? Maybe there's a verse that comes to mind in his logbook that made you think, oh man, this is just like when he said, let there be light, and there was light. Or when he said that perfect love casts out all fear. Maybe your science project made you think about that verse. Go ahead and include that in your conclusion. Let people see that as you are a scientist, you actually took time to converse with the greatest scientist of all times, God himself. As we become microbiologists together this year and we go through the process of writing things down and making logbook entries in our science logbook, I really pray that you have a chance to get to know the greatest scientist of all and to read his logbook. Because the fascinating thing about his logbook is he doesn't just tell us how he created. He tells us why he created. And not only does he tell us why he created, but he seeks and pursues relationship with you. He wants to know you. He created you to know him and to learn more and more about him as you live your life. So go ahead, read his science logbook and get to know the greatest scientist